of Genesis, and especially these words, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a burying place that I may bury my dead out of my sight. On Mount Moriah, Abraham had passed the supreme test of his faith life. On that mount, Abraham gave in return to God what God had given him, his son, his only son, whom he loved more than life itself. In Abraham, God found the offering, the only offering that counts in his sight, an unfaltering faith, an undivided heart. The rest of the years of his life after that mountaintop experience seemed to have tapered off. He lived out his days in calm contentment and faith. Two more scenes does the Scripture describe of Abraham's life, one in sorrow, the other in joy. The death of his wife Sarah and the marriage of his son Isaac. Both of them are recorded in some detail, which should not surprise us, for both of these things are major factors in our own lives also. And somehow it is a tremendous comfort to us to know that our bitterest tears and our sweetest joys, at graveside and at the marriage altar, God attaches the same importance to them that we do. The text tells us simply that Sarah lived 127 years, and Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, and Abraham came to mourn for her and to weep for her. Sarah died. Just a simple statement of fact. Sarah, Abraham's wife, died. It appears that it happened suddenly without any advance warning. Wherever Abraham was, on some cattle drive or at a distant market, he came quickly when the word reached him. His heart was broken before the lifeless form of his wife, and he wept all unashamed. She with whom and for whom he had long time lived and labored and loved was now gone. The bond of one flesh between them was broken, and that's just the way a man feels, broken in two. For of all of the tears that sting our eyes in a lifetime, and God knows there are many, the bitterest tears ever shed are still those at the graveside of our loved one. And perhaps beside God, only you people who have been through it know that of all the ties that are torn with great pain, loss of father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, family, or friend, there is no grief like that of losing one's life's companion, a husband or a wife. Much is made of Abraham in the Scripture. But don't you people forget that Sarah is many times mentioned in Old Testament and New also. Hers had not been an easy life. It was difficult for Abraham to leave his home, his kindred, and his country, and journey forth he knew not where. But it is many times harder for a woman who loves more to leave everyone and everything she knows behind and journey forth she knows not where. Sarah's first name was Sarai, which means princess, which perhaps gives us a clue to her standing in Ur of the Chaldees, the highest of the ancient civilizations that we know of today. And she left it all to go with her husband. She endured danger for his sake, risking her own life for him in Egypt and in Philistia. The long period of her life she was barren. Her heart ached and her arms empty to hold a little one of her own. She suffered the contempt and unkind cuts of the Egyptian handmaid Hagar and her son. And she must have been quite a woman to manage the household that Abraham had when 318 of his cowboys were born in the compound, and when he was so often gone from home as a herdsman had to be. And still she stayed unfailingly faithful to her husband, when there were many times when it would have been easy for her not to. For she was an exceedingly beautiful woman, desired by all who ever saw her, and kings and rulers desired her. Through faith alone in the promises of God, long past the age, Sarah conceived, gave birth, and reared up a son named Isaac. Laughter she named him, for she said, God hath made me to laugh. And 37 more years did God give her to see the little laughter of her life grow up into manhood. More important, to abide one with her in heart and in faith. Sarah died, whom St. Paul calls the mother of the New Testament church, whom St. Peter describes as a model for us all to imitate. Sarah died. None of this sentimental slush in the Bible about she passed on or departed. In the Bible, people die. Now, some people have a thing against the Bible for being so frank. But you better remember that those glittering television commercials of yours are not telling you the whole story. People sometimes argue what kind of death is the better to die. Or is it preferable to know about it ahead of time or be taken away suddenly? What difference does that make? The sons and daughters of God, who are in league with the Lord and giver of life, hate death. Death is an enemy to them. Or let the people who are frightened by it try to hide from the fact of it. Let the others who cannot face death plunge themselves into activity so they don't have to think about it. And let the philosophers continue blathering about their amor fati, the love of your faith. Learn to live it and love it. Imagine saying something like that to somebody with a malignancy. Love your cancer. Embrace the cobalt machine. Utter stupidity. The Bible calls death something that you and I can understand, an enemy. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. People through the centuries have invented soft names for death. The ancients spake of Atropos sitting with her little scissors, and at her whim snipping the slender thread of life. Or of Charon, the aged boatman who waits at a river Styx to carry the living from the shoreline of life. Or Father Time with his sickle. The ancient Egyptians turned their entire country into one vast cemetery, tombs and pyramids. The Aztecs conquered Mexico, not for plunder, but for human sacrifices to appease their man-eating gods of death. The famous 16th century explorer Ponce de Leon slogged through the swamps of Florida looking for the fabled Fountain of Youth. And we Americans who spend billions each year trying to stay young probably hadn't ought to poke any fun at anyone, especially Ponce de Leon. The Life Extension Society in our own country, I've read, has already deep frozen corpses for reanimation at a later date. Good men and bad, physicians and fakes, have tried to handle death, hold it back, deal with her, and do away with death, but to no avail. Why should there be such a thing as death and burial? Why do even our folk songs link together love and death? Why is even birth into this world come accompanied with the pangs and fear of death? Why is there so much sickness and suffering leading to death? With shocking bluntness, the Bible tells you, and it tells you on page 3, the reason for the tragedies of life is due to the disobedience of man to the Creator. The world has lost her peace because she lost her peace with God. Behind all human suffering and human death is human guilt. You can deny it, disbelieve it, shake your fist in disgust at it, but you won't change it. Man's only hope to escape death is to find somebody who can take care of that human guilt for him. And that somebody is the seed of Abraham, Jesus Christ. But let's not get ahead of the story. How does one believer behave in the face of the death of a loved one? Well, let us examine Abraham before his hour of weeping is done. He has now hastily to make preparation for burial. But where? Not 1 square foot of Canaan can he call his own. To the children of Heth, his neighbors, to the fathers sitting in the city gate, he goes to plead his case. And listen carefully to what he says, for it's the key to understanding everything about the life of Abraham. Abraham said, I am a stranger and a sojourner. Give me a possession for a burying place among you, that I may bury my dead out of sight. Hang on to that phrase. I am a stranger and a sojourner. And of course, it tells us with what high respect and courtesy and generosity Abraham was handled. The measure of the man himself among the godless neighbors. You do not need a possession for a burial ground, they tell Abraham. The very best that we have, our own sepulchres. You may have your choice of them, any that you please. Just take one. And graciously, Abraham rises and bows and acknowledges the compliment and the kind offer, but asks if Ephraim would not perhaps for a fair price sell the field and the cave and the trees that border on the end of his property. And what follows here is a bit strange to our American ear. But travelers to the Middle East tell us that this is the way that business is still transacted. First, the seller will offer as a free gift whatever you might admire. Now, you're not supposed to accept it, though. And after you politely decline, which Abraham does, then the seller will set an exorbitant price, which Ephraim does, 400 shekels of silver. Now that's $5,000 for less than an acre of unused land, and that's not bad even by our inflated market. But what is that between me and thee? And then follows the thing that the Oriental delights in, the haggling back and forth, the bargaining and jewing one another down. 400 shekels of silver, what's that between men like us, Ephraim says. And before the astonished eyes of Ephraim, Abraham does it. Right there on the spot, he weighs out 400 shekels of silver. Abraham does not haggle over filthy lucre nor argue over his wife's grave. Abraham trusts that his blessings come from God, and he doesn't have to bargain with the greedy to stay ahead. nor does he have to chisel Ephraim down to the very last shekel. He pays it on the spot. And I've often wondered what merchants must say in their hearts when religious people come into their store and try to cheat them out of an honest profit, who demand a religious discount in the name of the church, who deny the God that they claim gives them all of their blessings, and then connive like clever devils to get the very last shekel. What a reminder to us to walk honestly and honorably as children of the living God, in whom we live and move and have our being. The business deal is concluded. And there within sight of home, in the cave of Machpelah, Abram lays the body of his wife to rest. And there, years later, will the body of Abraham himself be laid to rest, and also his sons and his grandsons after him. Abraham does not want his body to be transported back to his home country, for God had promised this land to him, and he wanted that grave to be a reminder to his children that he believed that promise. That sepulcher was a mute but eloquent testimony that Abraham believed that the land of promise would be given his offspring. And years later, when Israel galled under the yoke of bondage in Egypt, they were to think of this story of the cave of Machpelah, to remember him who staggered not at the unfailing promises of God, and to trust that at his hour God would bring them to that land, and they would find their rest and lie down in the very shadow of Machpelah as their very own possession. I am a stranger and a sojourner, Abraham said. And that people is the secret of our Christian faith. You must not be blind to the fact that we are only pilgrims here. Don't be so materialistically minded, so idolatrous of the things of this world that you can't let go of them. I am but a stranger and a pilgrim, and nothing brings that back home to us like the death of a loved one. And the church's business is not to make the prodigal son feel a little bit more comfortable in the distant country, but to remind the prodigal son of his real home, of the Father who waits for him and watches and wanting him home. That does not spoil your love affair on earth. The man who knows that he has his wife but for a few short years loves her more, not less. How much more he appreciates the blessings and companions whom God sends him on the way. That's what makes the fight of faith worth it, knowing that this world is not the last word on the matter. How despairing, how hopeless, how selfish they become who make this world their all in all, when they know all the while that at the end it will slip through their fingers like sand. I am a sojourner and a pilgrim among you. So spake Abraham, speaking for ourselves too. Certainly we sorrow at the death of a loved one. There is nothing wrong, people, with a little good old-fashioned crying and heartache and sorrow. What makes you feel you must be bombed out on drugs or on alcohol or activity to dull yourself against the pain? Our Lord himself wept before the grave of Lazarus. God contrast what you, the pilgrim people of God, have with this mumbling, numbing, better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Contrast what you and I can cry with the whining and wailing of the godless. For me to live is Christ, to die is gain. Or to stand on that cemetery ground and sing with Paul, "O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God which giveth us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ." I am a stranger and a pilgrim among you. Well, if Abram felt that way, why didn't he go back to his home country? If on this earth he was a pilgrim, if in this life he was only a traveler, where then was Abram's real home, his eternal, everlasting rest? Abraham frankly confessed, "I have no continuing city here. I seek a city not made with hands, eternal and everlasting in the heavens." All that Abram saw from a distance, but clearly, as Jesus said, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." Learn to look to him who can stand before the blank wall of death and say, "There is no wall," who stopped the funeral procession in far-off Galilee to restore a dead son to a widowed and bereaved mother, who stood before the rock-bound grave of Lazarus at Bethany and called him for grave clothes and all, who bent over the bed of the 12-year-old Judean maid whom he raised from death with the word Talitha Kumi, who beckons this day to you and to me from beyond the grave. "I am the resurrection and the life. He that liveth and believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live." Believest thou this? Believest thou this? Amen. The peace of God which passeth all understanding, keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Amen.
and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive